There was a being who found himself alone in the universe. This being sent out a calling. I want you to imagine the edge of a pure uh, how would I say it? What are the golden thoughts from the universe beyond? I want to begin with sharing this idea, and it's a very personal idea. Sometimes my imagination moves before my body. Sometimes my mind moves before my body, and that becomes imagination. Sometimes my mind moves with the body, and that becomes reality. Sometimes the body moves without my mind, and that becomes confusion. So, this is a state of abstract existence that I'm observing within. That means if I closed my eyes and if I didn't, I would still be seeing the same abstract design. I saw a being in on a planet that was empty, and this being sent out a golden tear and threw it to the neighboring galaxy. This was a very playful kind of sci-fi thought experiment I had, and in some sense how the experience, not thought experience, I could say vision. It was more of something that just came to me, you know. Pretty much, I kind of got this feeling that the last refuge of absolute existential isolation is communication. What that means is subconsciously, I feel we as a species have recognized, every human being has recognized how lonely life can be. And in the just like how we find ourselves alone in the whole solar system, we're wondering, okay, imagine like we had like, different civilizations on all the planets of our solar system and they were in communication with one another, right? But we're not in that situation. We're in an utter isolation, as if the universe appears to us as an empty box. Now, regardless of how deeply we get entertained by Fermi's paradox and how much we wonder where is everybody, where are all the aliens or extraterrestrial life, we begin to see one's duty, your survival instincts will take you from isolation into collectivity. That means pain is a symptom of disharmony. And you can say a human being's pure harmonious state is one where he's not against his world. That's the key. That's the secret. That's why being a decent human being means you're not complexifying things too much. You're taking life as it comes. You're accepting life as it happens. And based on some moments of your life, your free will be 100% engaged. But there will be some moments of your life where your free will be like, let's say, 10% engaged. Let's make free will a sort of quantity, okay? Out, and let's say we give this quantity, we say it's like 100%. Everybody has free will, okay? Now this free will, I find, gets divided 50-50 the moment you wake up in the morning, gets divided 50-50 in regards to a subjective sense of being and an objective sense of, okay? That we, in some sense, can work with what we consider to be ideas. That means the world births ideology behind our eyes. It manifests it. It manifests it. It arises. This is why arising is a very powerful verb. It means regardless of any condition, a lift, as if you're lifting of yourself from the chair of ignorance into the clarity of an effort to actually live your life. And what that means is, this let's say quantity that we say is the free will. Your free will is divided into a subjective self and an objective self. Now this subjective self and objective self have a unique relationship. That means, believe it or not, your attention is keeping yourself and the world at the same time, which makes it probable that they are both simultaneous projections. I proved this to myself in a dream state. What that means is, I remember having a dream where in the dream I wanted to go left, I would go left. I wanted to go right, I would go right. You know, there would be something where some people have called it lucid dreaming, but I don't consider it lucid dreaming. I consider it the simulative aspects of the mind. The mind works in simulations. It works in bursts of effort, of energetic effort. These bursts of energetic effort, due to this common, let's say, ideal view that is like the common denominator of all your memories, that witnessing self that has watched the world happen as you've lived, that self, your free will, if the ratio moves beyond 50% objective, you will not care about thoughts because your body is becoming the engagement of the experiencer. But if you go 50% subjective, you pay attention to how the mind is more than the body, you will come to surpass both. What I mean by that is, whatever you pay attention to, you attain depth from. Sometimes you can say, like, I've had some people, like, how can I say it? Sometimes truth is deep in an illusion, uh, in an deluded society. Okay, we worship matter, you know, regardless of how it's presented. People are, in some sense, trying to move towards something. And this is why man's state of mind, this is something that I found, by, I was like, it was a very profound holy shit moment when I noticed the kind of influence of religion. Because when I was younger, I had a very normal view of religion, like it's just something. And then, eventually, based on how the global society engaged it, I began to see that it is, in some sense, falling apart because people are, rather than, it's like the more human beings that become responsible, the less instructions they need, pretty much. What that means is, there's a sort of natural state of being where, in that natural state of being, your thought moves beyond 50%. Sorry, no, your subjective, your free will chooses to exist as a mind to itself, pretty much. When that happens, it becomes something where you become the divinity of your own story, pretty much. It's an integration through a self realization that your presence is non dual when your personality is. Duality is the shape of man, is the shape of our stories. Without light and darkness, without change, there is no world. There's just a picture of no meaning. Your attention is the God of your choice. We have to be very mindful, I think. Mindful is another term for being street smart, but internally. What that means is your attention, if when your attention, you treat your attention like a shrine, you begin suddenly noticing that depth dimensions begin to be added as the same experience is constantly put into motion. What that means is there's a sort of mastery that is attained not without inspiration or motivation. It's not a marketed sort of thing. It's one of those things where once you live in an honest, once you find an honest world to live in, you will be an honest self. In the honesty of that self, suddenly the universe no longer reacts to your the relationship you have with life has to do with your sincerity. Your sincerity is what you were in your childhood and thought you weren't in the years that came after, but came to see that man can break matter, but he cannot break space. Our knowledge will forever be limited, but the unknown is forever limitless. So the more man began seeking a sort of limitless evolution, the more he came to an unknown involvement and greater relationships with nature. You see, I feel like that's what our planet is missing out on when technology gets a louder voice than the flower under the boot of the construction worker. This quantity of free will, if you're subjective, if you choose to be more of a mind than like if you choose to be more a mind that is projecting a body rather than a body that is in some sense howling your brain around, I feel like this is a nice way I can say it. You attain a state, you enter a station of thought. You find yourself in a moment where the governing universal values behind it's as if like once you listen to your conscience, it brings you to your intuition, to the voice of your intuition. When you listen to the voice of your intuition, it will take you to the voice of your journey, pretty much the voice of your pride. And once you, where the voice of your pride takes you is in the voice, like how can I say it? It's as if as you move towards the unknown, the more you see it is your future that is pulling you out of the problems of the past. That means this is a playful theory I have, and I will say it both to religious and non religious ears. I believe angels and this whole notion of a sort of guardian protective force upon mankind, that is the future self of the species that is no longer non-dual. So here's the thing I'm saying that we evolved as individuals. First we were nature, unconscious, collectively just all one thing. Then this whole world suddenly began arising, these evolutionary creatures that they found a way to separate themselves, and then they had resources. That means we had to stop being the world to be able to do things in the world. We had to separate ourselves. And even though physically we cannot, that's the beautiful thing about this Rubik's Cube of life, that physically nature's voice is wise. But internally, That free will, that quantity, that out of nothing something was seen. It's like you can say, with mystic, and you begin caring about the communication the world is giving you. You see, most people don't care. Living in an era that ideal worship has made people statues in society, or at least attempters of programmatic kind of acceptable behavior. For me, our society is not really society. It's an illusion of success. You see, it is not succeeding. It is an illusion of success. And that is in some sense the falsity of marketing. Do you see that this is why the philosophers and poets are wise enough? They have already found their allegiance. The poetic mind and the philosophical mind, they have the same kind of, they're going to be comrades in the same war. You see, different branches of knowledge has honored different ways that this manifest moment has been an intelligence. When heaven asked earth, why don't you come to me? Hell said, heaven said, earth said, because hell is holding me back. And that's when heaven looked at earth and said, where does hell come from? And the origin of man's mind finally knew its position. That behind your eyes you have nowhere to go aside from the limitless. It is not, we're not temporary creatures going into nothing. We are nothing that has become something. And this something lives to be eternally. There is no greater game to play. That means when you're on this rock and you realize you're a temporary creature, you will seek immortality. This is why we're all trying to be immortal. Believe it or not, we are. That's any person who wants to be a millionaire wants to be immortal. They will be pulled into that conclusion because material value has been more convincing than what the material led to. Sometimes I wonder, is it really about truth, the situation, or is it about the journeyers, the passengers into the space-time continuum? Sometimes I feel we forget life is not something that has to constantly be functioning in rules. It is the rule creator. That means the freedom of chaos becomes the enslavement of order. But the freedom of order becomes the enslavement of chaos. Yet the freedom of chaos and order becomes the separation. So what I mean by that is, like, imagine one line being cut in half and the other line becomes parallel to the other line. One reality is divided. There's a sort of multidimensionality of uh, classification of self separate from world. Golden thoughts can be said to be moments of clarity. These moments of clarity are, you can say, nuggets of as if just like how planets align, your emotions, your thoughts, your body, every dimensional classification and component to you becomes the eternal return. It becomes the calling of all galaxies. It becomes the destiny of a changing particle. Believe it or not, science, I don't believe depth arises from phenomena. What I mean by that is I believe multidimensionality, if it's said to you, will not have as much of a pristine nectar as if you were to bite the forbidden fruit. Yourself defines how the world is to you before you even function. This is why what many people don't understand, and this is why if the concept of karma was looked into a bit more deeply, one would begin to find it is the karma of the universal sector. It is a sort of macrocosmic process that, in some sense, within it, in the micro, there has been the eyes of man that has opened. For me, the fact that there is something here, it's as if we return to nothing, no need to fear. And we constantly become something. You see? Pretty much you can say a temporary changing creature is building the eternal sort of rhythmic allegiance and alignment with the eternal momentum of the cosmos. Energy is so vast and so wild that if any being, any person, was to just sit down and do nothing into entering novelty, you cannot avoid the. So for me, I want to tell you that imagination has a speed, and society is an institution. I don't want to say even an institution. Okay, maybe I can't say. What word should I say? Society is establishment, or let's say society is a helping hand to a sort of communion of conversation. We create a sort of place where we say, in this place, we are trying to provide a free service to the world where the greatest conversations can be had. What that means is we have the honor of the samurai when we speak. We stand strong in our humility. We attain vulnerability of character by recognizing the world is constantly shaping it. Who you are now is not who you will be tomorrow, yet the same eyes will be open. That is the mystery of the world. There is a very unique thing that consciousness does, is that, let's say there's two polarities to every living moment of consciousness. These polarities are an urge to pull all phenomena towards emptiness and to pull all phenomena towards fulfillment. That means we can say you have two hemispheres of the brain. You have a sort of chaotic urge and an ordered urge. In an ancient Native American context, where there was this Cherokee story, where in that story there was this grandfather went to his grandson and told this grandson a story that blew the grandson's mind into a new self. And in some sense, the grandson here's a story from the grandfather where the grandfather says, grandson. The grandfather says, there's two wolves inside you, one good, one evil. One, in some sense, bright, the other dark in character. The same forces as just as wolves. The grandson The grandson says which wolf wins, and the grandfather looks at him and says, the one you feed. That kid goes on being fascinated by the story, not fully comprehending it until years later realizing those two wolves were the urge to go towards chaotic actions or towards inefficient actions and go towards efficient actions or ordered actions. Because we're biological beings that require maintenance, self maintenance, we have to value the objective. I don't like any ideology or metaphysics that makes the person feel they have to avoid being responsible for the biological body. That means it's one thing for the new age community to play fun and games with like being a yogi or something, but it is not okay when we recognize we are the wars that were external now have become internal. We have to now fight the thoughts that the world is inefficiently making us think. We have to recognize there's a sort of uniqueness. It's like behind your eyes, there's so much pure, true data of your own experiences that you don't access because you choose to walk the path of the falsified self, the self that's just trying to make it. The first thing human beings must do is be able to create a civilization that takes them out of the state of mind of an emergency. Okay? We have to feel comfortable in our living room, and our living room is not just our house, it is just the whole world that's open here, that's alive in front of us. We are the eyes of a universe that have opened. There could be no thought more golden. We can say we have a relationship with the world and with where that world is finding meaning. Our species has been tormented by the mistakes of history. We feel we are civilized. We wear suits and ties, but not realizing the lack of morality or the lack of care for the world to come makes us walk over the world we have built already blind. The first immediate action of alignment is clarity. That means if you ask somebody, yo man, what do I need in this life? Tell me. Like imagine like you were just a new consciousness on this plane. I would tell you it would be to seek efficient vision, which eventually comes to clarity. Because the clearer you perceive the data, the more accurate your experience is. We are creatures that build our stories as we go through the experiences of life. Live a life that is a story you want to hear every day. You know, for me, I found my life has no meaning unless I push myself to the limits of my knowing. That became the exciting thing for me. You know, it doesn't mean everybody should do it, but I mean, like, I found it very interesting that We know nothing of how we are knowing things. And neurology has reached a certain way, has drilled through the unknown in a certain path. So many approaches have been done by different human beings in trying to comprehend the ultimate resolution of just all this whole phenomena. And what many have concluded is that due to every moment being a moment of change, that means, like when I say a moment ago, I was saying something else, now I'm saying this. Legit, what is happening is that it's not just past going to the present and then the present going to the future. That's not it. It's it's the present observing how past is constantly turning into the future. How there's a passage of moments due to the efforts of activity. It's as if every time you blink, there's a world behind your eyes, a world that just the snapshot of echoes behind in your memory. You know, for me, when I realized, like I remember I wrote this line of kind of like this poetic line where I said your body is made of earth, your mind is made of heaven, or made of the sky, something like that. And that was the crucial point. And I noticed the potential behind our eyes is limitless. Why? Where else can a temporarily shaped individual being go? Its philosophies will now dictated and oriented into the sort of like our survival will now become dependent on how much we're willing to put our attention as a species on the most efficient ideas. That means we gotta be street smart about world peace. That's what the UN doesn't understand. They don't understand that voices can. Every person has a potential to, um, in some sense, not only receive ideas and express them, but to be able to acknowledge the commonality. That means just like how we see, for example, birds in the sky flying all together in a sort of unique harmony. You can just Google it, birds do that. Similarly, we're seeing human beings communicating with one another. That's what the internet is. This whole YouTube thing, that's what it is. You are in some sense like a bird going alongside the rhythms and the manifestations and the expressions of another being. And so we are finding ourselves in a very unique time because but our ancestors did not have access to this unless they talked a lot. Some people think talking is talking. No, talking is communication is not an act. It is a process. It is a process of nature that as it becomes conscious, it storifies. So it stores and turns into a story. Or it stores by turning it into a story. We have to be very careful about um, how much we change for the world and how much the world changes us. And there needs to be certain parameters set that we begin to study the mind first through its effects. We do not conclude a cause. We don't say this is the truth and that is the truth and we start fighting over that shit. Like that's meaningless. It's like like all let's say an extraterrestrial just came to check out like what our species is doing and suddenly found that like an atheist and theist debating and listen to that conversation. That extraterrestrial would in some sense be like, okay, time to go. That extraterrestrial would see two creatures just shouting at one another. Would see two how would I say it? Like As worlds collide, new dimensions are found from each world. As people communicate, language acts as a sort of bridge between inner realities. I realize that, like, when you say, like, when people say, like, okay, let's, like, how can I say it? It's like, in order to get to know someone, you must not just see who they are in their visible dimensions, but who they are in their invisible dimensions. And what that means is how their free will is choosing to value the life in front of them. That's so important to be measured. Not measured, but observed. That means you want to see that, how can I say it? Somebody said it's like you can't expect mutual trust, but you must hold on, you must move with mutual respect. What that means is, respectfully, the inner dimensions of human beings becomes explored. As it becomes explored, people's individuality begin emerging the same story. You see, as if, like, what was unique about lovers, like, it's like Romeo and Juliet are not the only great like, mythic kind of, like, mythic kind of legendary lovers in reality. There's been many stories of very profound lovers in history. Like, that's one of the missions of literature, to preserve that. But anyways, um, one can say that, here, I'll tell you this. There was a story of these two lovers, Layli and Majnun, and these were in lovers in the east of the east. Romeo and Juliet are the great lovers of the west. These two can be considered the great lovers of the east. And Layli and Majnun, there's how can I tell you? There's this very awesome story that Majnun is the guy, Layli is the girl. And so Majnun is sitting at the table with his homeboys, and Layli is also sitting there. And so Majnun is this character who is so in love with Layli, as if, like, as if this was a being he was being pulled towards, like a divine calling or something. That was the level of this dude's love. You know, like God and, like, his lover were the same in some sense. It was like the gravity of this moment. It was what was pulling his being in the moment. You know, and so Majdu is there. This kind of, like, desperately in love with, like, the divinity of this girl or something, like Lady. But Majnun and Lady, they were close, and then, like, how can I tell you, like. So, anyways, they're sitting at the table as the story goes, and suddenly Lady stands up and comes to Majnun's plate and gets Majnun's plate and slams it in front of all his friends, you know, you know, and breaks the plate. Okay, and suddenly, in that moment where the plate breaks, Majnun and all of Majnun's friends are like, "Holy shit, this dude's probably heartbroken right now. Holy shit," And Lady leaves with her friends. And so Majnun is there, but they, instead of Majnun being depressed and sad because of what Layli's done, broken his, like, plate and embarrassed him in front of all his friends or something. Majnun is just like, how can I tell you? It's like he's smiling, super happy, super cheerful. And Maju's friends look at him and they're like, "Why are you happy, bro? She broke your plate." You know? And Maju tells them, "He's like, guys, you don't understand. She broke my plate." So that was like kind of very playful level in the psychological analysis of kind of like legendary love, you know. And the whole idea was that there was an awareness to an acceptance when everybody else saw in their awareness a denial. You see, there was this hidden hope underneath the unhidden destruction, unhidden chaos. So what I'm telling you pretty much is that we feel we're on thin ice as a species, like humanity feels it's on thin ice, and what's underneath this thin ice? It is pure chaos. It is just if our species moves towards chaotic decisions, then it just ends. Trust me, it's like we don't want the species committing suicide. You know, that's extinction. That's another way of saying extinction. How would I say it? There was an awareness to the presence of reality. And I find that a way to handle one's states of being, especially if you are more materialistically inclined to accepting the totality of reality, as just pure matter. Um, I would advise that once you observe yourself, you give your mind enough freedom to be itself and then study it. You have to find your honesty, and then your own style emerges, your own unique originality emerges. Let me tell you, if you feel guilty for being how you are when you're just natural, when you're naturally, like, let's say, when you're in the shower singing, like that level of authenticity, when that level of authenticity is no longer inhibited in society, that means people can be who they are peacefully. Guys, honestly, I don't know how to interlink all these ideas I'm bringing up, but pretty much what I'm trying to tell you exactly, like it arises from a feeling, and it's a feeling of a shock. It's this shock that our world is through a certain program of coagulating beliefs trying to make things work. And we are 8 billion, not just bodies, but minds. And each mind holds within us an infinite, like a world's ad infinitum. That is the sort of intelligence we hold. We don't just eat data. We process it into new reality. So one can say, like, this is why it's so easy for science not to have morality, because it believes any sort of experimentation upon reality can be justified. Do you see what I'm saying? The world is blind in many ways, but it can also attain clarity in many ways. And for me, it has to come from this universal responsibility that eventually, like people right now are too, they can't see it. They can't see out of the linguistic simulation behind their eyes how this world could be anything else. Yet that requires a strength to actually confront the unknown. And to confront the unknown means to just stop the false action. Just stop any action that just intuitively and emotionally feels false to you. And you will automatically be pulled towards a lighter vision. Your sense of self, uh, for now, is probably limited to just a family level and the national level, and maybe your own different cultural styles you've incorporated yourself on. But I feel inevitably it's going to become so global where we're going to just acknowledge, we're going to just call the whole species humanity. One word is enough. One word is enough for the whole species to explain the whole species in some sense. We don't realize it, but language is honestly such a profound world. It is the bricks to our future, how we use language. The bricks that build our future. The ideas that cause our decisions, cause us to be creatures that express our energy into a sort of activity externally. Every person has a task of studying the forces of the universe from their own unique original position. One thing they should be saying in all schools in any class, a kind of mandatory thing you have to hear as you enter every classroom. Learn something not because you need it from the learn something not because you need it for the world. Learn something because the world needs it from you. When you care for the world, uh, the inner child within you points towards where you knew you should go and have not, in some sense, found. You can say the relationship of one's intuition has to do with the various levels that came into position. Once, from a state of sincerity, there came false living. False living is very important because the emotions will not be contained in it properly, so it's a waste of a memory. That's how you should think. That let's say that's how we think for now. That the mind is a sort of file cabinet of various incidents of experiences. Now, this file cabinet, I'm telling you, it's more like a tunnel, and it's more like a muscle when you understand it. And a muscle rhythmically and cyclically advances. We don't have so much power that we can make the earth rotate another way. Yet, on this earth, we can accept that the earth moves in one way, yet on this earth, we can choose to rotate the other way in our own relationship. Alan Watts, in one of his lectures, he had this very profound philosophical idea, mathematically inspired philosophical idea, where he said, if there is two spheres orbiting, spinning around one each other in empty space, how can we know which is spinning around which? And so that suggests man's fabrication of civilization and how the thought of eternity came before any sort of eternal experience. You cannot avoid it. You cannot avoid how your mind moves alongside all nature. A term I've created is the language threshold. The language threshold is when you attain an experience that cannot be put into language. And so you begin to see the hollowness of words, but you see that the skeleton of the ideology, sequencing of the ideology is valuable to be communicated. All children in all educational systems should know this, that you must live for the world that has lived for you. That's it. You don't have to go unturn every stone. You have to, in some sense, care to be enough responsible to attempt an effort for the whole species, whatever it is. If you're an art, it could be your art. But you have to be conscious of it. That's the thing. A lot of artists draw in unconscious states, semi-conscious states. Salvador Dali, one of the most incredible artists on this planet, he doesn't get the kind of attention he actually should be getting through history, in history. But Salvador Dali, before he would sleep, he had this canvas and the paint and everything right beside him, and he would sit on beside his bed in his pajamas, and he would put his spoon on his knee, okay, and then he would put a bucket beside it or something, and so he would start just kind of like going into this, like, wait until he fell asleep or something. Not fell asleep, like he was semi between sleep and wakefulness, and he would start drawing. And I could kind of, in some sense, I guess, respectfully and playfully, kind of give a slight commentary on what could have been happening in his mind in that semi-awake, semi-sleep state. What occurs is that as you go towards sleep, there is more of an acceptance of automated manifest flow. That means how the world flows as a sort of manifestation. Individuality is simply a luxury of a collective system. That its time has come. Something like that. What that means is there's nothing more powerful than what is happening right now. Nothing. The past is past. It's kind of like, as Papaji, this guru, Indian enlightened guru, so seen as, like, he said, the past is a graveyard. And yet at the same time, we see the future hasn't arrived, as if the future is waiting for the present to make a decision. So the future, there's no point of thinking about the future until you actually act, and then the dimensions open up for the future to, in some sense, happen. That means if you're doing nothing right now, don't think about the future, because you can't do anything with it unless you choose to act. There has to be Like, this is the greatest inspiration. You're a temporary creature on this planet. You tell me how much you want to risk it all every day. You tell me how we are temporary creatures that enjoy efficiency. And efficiency means finding the best route through. As if when there's stairs up the mountain, you don't have to just only go your own way. You know, being street smart about truth means directly experiencing it yourself. When we wonder what is beyond the universe, we wonder about the edges of our mind's ability to perceive the universe. We find those edges we find a sort of bridge, or let's say a border, of sensory phenomena being transformed into internal subjectivity. So when you eat food, for example, it doesn't just satisfy your body, it satisfies the subjectivity directing your body. For example, you go and say, guys, that burger joint had the best burger I ever ate, or something, you know? So, what I mean is, it's a sort of notion that, as important as animal cruelty is, the overall collective efficient action is important. Easiest approach is world peace. First, we got to be able to imagine our world peace. This is why I feel the world can't end. The world will only end when mankind reaches the ultimate perfection. That means the end of the world is so far because, in some sense, existence still has something to say before it leaves. You know? I feel if the whole species could develop some sort of samurai dojo community of moral global ethics and of advanced recalibration of knowledge and the educational system towards giving all children a chance to try to give a response to the hardest problems. What that means is, I remember hearing Elon Musk, and he evoked a very profound idea in my mind. And what he said is that he likes to get a feedback loop to kind of see how things are constantly working and being kept. So similarly, this is sort of an internal feedback loop where the patterns, where your behavior, rather than being judged as uh, efficient or inefficient by momentary snapshots, you're beginning to see the dance that your intelligence is doing on this planet, how your intelligence and expression moves, and you choose the edges. You choose how far your freedom goes for you, and how much you go for freedom. in this science fiction novel that I've been working on. It's called The Messenger of Giants. And even though Mr. Within is my alias, my real name is Amin Jabbar Ansari. But the thing is that the Messenger of Giants was this notion I had when I noticed the vastness of the unknown. And so there's a character in this book where, in this book, I have given myself ultimate, I have allowed my imagination to go wild, pretty much. And there's a sort of character where once he's confronted about his past life, he realizes his past life, he was a galaxy. He was like the consciousness of the whole galaxy or something. Like it's as that profound, And so this sort of notion of a calling of galaxies, this sort of notion of various movements of intelligence towards processing data, that sometimes I look at my imagination and I'm like, I see it, but I physically don't until I write or communicate. So pretty much I find the most efficient actions that Mr. Within, I guess, let's go back into, you know, the YouTube vibe, What Mr. Within would suggest to you, don't fear anything until you have experienced it. And it's so important how your relationship with language is. And relationship with language is not just an ability to communicate. It's not just like your voice, your accent, or your tone, your pitch, or the intention behind what the communication. It's not just that. It's you see what's important in your reality, and you take gentle steps towards it. That's pretty much it. In the dirt of the world, you find the diamond. And this diamond is very precious. This diamond is the elegance of this 4 billion-year-old kind of science project that has become our civilization. Just like how the body heals itself, the world and civilization and society maintains itself. The world is healing, sort of unknown ability to enable an instantaneous awareness of the cause and effect. That's when your ego kind of no longer exists because reality is valid instantaneously. So many people understand the concept of enlightenment, but very few people know how long it takes. And when like some people in history have asked that, many enlightened people, like, how long does it take to get enlightened? And many of the enlightened teachers have just looked at the student and shouted, and they said it takes an instant. Like Kabir shouted at someone who said this to him, he said, half of an instant it takes for you. That's how long it takes to get enlightened. And when he said half of an instant, he was trying to enlighten the person to first step out of the language simulation. Once you step out of this kind of enforced language simulation that is kind of like pretty much social uh, behavior and social responsibility, you find yourself in just dwelling in your true nature until you see where the value is in life and you move towards it. A friend of mine once told me, uh, told me the metaphor of a mountain, and he told me that when you're at the bottom of a mountain, when you simply observe it, you see one way that the mountain looks. As you keep climbing the mountain, in each moment that you stop climbing and look at the mountain, the way the mountain is valid to you has now changed. So, in some sense, as free will moves in a changing world, it changes all the previous conclusions it had of the change, because the change is the definer. This is why Plato it came to a certain state of mind that he said time is the moving image of eternity, which means it is moving language in the void. All is one when all is one. But when all is one, many shall remember their own one. You at first start on an ideological level because pretty much these podcasts, the best they can do is be conversation. And not just conversations, or rather, when I speak, I'm speaking not just, it's a very unique approach I have as a speaker because I am not just speaking to humanity, I am speaking to all intelligent life. I don't even give, I can't even see the audience's faces, but I'm saying all intelligent, self aware beings, regardless of uh, the way they have been, in some sense, positioned in matter. There's a sort of calling, there's a sort of, uh, as if like this kind of loud um, symphony of responsibility awaiting to be composed by individual effort into collective vision. Once a being's mind has freedom, their soul begins to dance. When the soul begins to dance, the universe has now moved from a limited, conditioned way that life was only allowed to be into an unconditional ability of like dishonesty reduces excitement in life. Guilt, a guilty man has no motivation because he feels he doesn't deserve. We have to allow to refresh our minds just like we refresh like the browser of like an internet browser. Just press Control R on the keyboard. Control how you are a remembrance of the cosmos. Your free will is here to be used. Why else would you be in those eyes? So I feel that before we can even judge each other on an objective level, subjectively we can't even see how each other we can't see through each other's eyes. So this is why respect is so important in a society, because when respect is forgotten, For me, when I see cultures, you can say all cultures have a life cycle, a lifespan. And for me, I feel the most powerful culture for now is Japanese culture, the most long standing, the most honorable. And how can I tell you? Because efficiency was made as a big value. To experience high quality and high levels of life became valuable to the brain. There's a man by the name of Swami Satchidananda. He says any kind of expectation creates a problem. We should accept but not expect. Whatever comes, accept it. Whatever goes, accept it. The immediate benefit is that your mind is always peaceful. Swami Satchidananda goes on to say, though we can't always see it at the time, if we look upon events with some perspective, we see things always happen for our best interests. We are always being guided in a way better than we know ourselves. You can say the future vision of the being is allowing them not to make mistakes in the past. Okay, I'm just going to go into a quote tunnel and I'm just going to read this quote slowly. Peace comes not from doing, but from undoing, not from getting, but from letting go. If your heart is beautiful, your face will be beautiful. Your life will be beautiful. Everything will be beautiful. He then says, like these are all separate quotes. Let us accept all the different paths as different rivers running toward the same ocean. All individual human beings leading up to the decisions of their whole civilization. He says, so anything that you throw comes back. All your actions are echoes. Whatever change we want to happen outside should happen within. If you walk in peace and express that peace in your very life, others will see you and learn something. How lovely. Anyways, he says, we are not going to change the whole world, but we can change ourselves and feel free as birds. We can be serene even in the midst of calamities, and by our sincerity make others more tranquil. Serenity is contagious. If we, he says, by our serenity make others more tranquil. Serenity is contagious. If we smile at someone, he or she will smile back, and a smile costs nothing. We should plague everyone with joy. Wow, that's we should plague everyone with joy. If we are to die in a minute, why not die happily laughing? The next tunnel, he says, you're the cause of your own joy or your own misery. You hold that power. You are your own friend and your own enemy. He then goes on to say, the light is within. It is already there. Take your time to see it. He says, do you want to know the secret of life? If you want to have everything, don't want anything. Everything will run after you. He says, who will be the happiest person? The one who brings happiness to others. Again, I love the quote. He says, never give up. Nothing is done overnight. Anyone who achieved anything in life always did it after many failures. Don't give up. Okay? He says we can see the same spirit in everybody only when we know that we are that spirit, Atman or self. Only a person who has understood his own self can see that self in everyone. Yep. That means the unknown doesn't take sides. He goes on to say, the moment you understand yourself as the true self, you find such peace and bliss that the impressions of the petty enjoyments you experienced before become as ordinary specks of light in front of the brilliant sun. He says, death can come at any minute, in any way. We do not know what is in store tomorrow or whether there is a tomorrow or even tonight. But still, we have the golden present. Now we are alive and kicking. What should we do now? Love all, serve all. That makes the most sense because eventually will lead to an efficient atmosphere. He says the greatest victory you can win is over your own mind. Yep. He says the same thing can be both good and bad. Whenever you speak of good, bad is also present. The world is a mixture of both. There is not good without bad. They are both sides of the same coin. Both are necessary. We have been given free will and discriminating capacity to select what is beneficial to us and to avoid what is detrimental to us. Even cobra poison can be used as medicine. Damn, yeah, that's good. I didn't know that. Cobra poison can be used as medicine. It would kind of make sense if that poison somehow, when it enters your body, purifies all the inefficiency, and suddenly you somehow get rid of it the moment you acknowledge that. I don't know, maybe. Anyways, he says don't depend on something that comes from outside. Outside things are never going to make you happy. Interesting. He says begin with little things daily, and one day you will be doing things that months back you would have thought impossible. By the way, guys, the reason I'm reading these quotes, I've included something in these talks where I say it's a quote tunnel. So I just see some like person who has I find like an interesting quote, and then I Google the quotes and I see like a list of their quotes, and so I start saying them one by one because I don't know like whoever's listening might get something from the quote, you know. But anyways, we're gonna continue the tunnel. He says our okay. So anyways, let's say like this. I don't know if I wrote that. He says begin with little things daily, and one day you will be doing things that months back you would have thought impossible. He then says our own true nature is infinite joy, always happy, always peaceful, always free. He then says if you do not pour water on your plant, what will happen? It will slowly wither and die. Our habits will also slowly wither and die away if we do not give them an opportunity to manifest. You need not fight to stop a habit. Just don't give it an opportunity to repeat itself. He says, now will never leave. It is always here, like a clear canvas that awaits our painter. Incredible. This dude's quotes are next level. He says, the truth is the same always. Whoever ponders it will get the same answer. Buddha got it, Patanjali got it, Jesus got it, Muhammad got it. The answer is the same, but the method of working it out may vary this way or that. He says God knows your breaking point. You simply don't know your own strength. And guys, there's 3 pages, but I can't be down that one. I find this man's mentality was very fascinating. You know how in some yogic traditions, where there's a disciple and a guru, like this guy's quote, Swami Satchidananda, all like I went through his quote tunnel, and he was one of those very self-realized people. To accept life, what an art that is. Such is the nature of the golden thoughts beyond the universe. Much blessings and namaste.